Hello, everyone. I'm Amber, and I'm about to share a story about my mother-in-law, Patricia, and how I managed to handle her relentless behavior towards me, particularly when it came to my supposed inheritance. Patricia has always been oddly fixated on the idea of my inheritance. Since I married her son Raymond, she frequently asked, "Amber, when will you get your inheritance? I heard it's around $35 million. Can you imagine the life we could live with that kind of money? It's taking forever to process, isn't it?" It was clear from the start that she was more interested in my finances than I was comfortable with. In my naivety, I had once mentioned the inheritance to her, which, looking back, was a massive mistake. After that, Patricia became strangely friendly, but her constant questioning about the money started to feel invasive. At first, I didn't think much of it. However, Raymond and my father-in-law, Gary, would often step in, telling Patricia, "You need to stop asking Amber about her inheritance. It's not our business, and it's irrelevant whether she gets it or not." Raymond even snapped at her, "Mom, you're being rude and invasive. Amber and I are fine financially. We're even supporting you and Dad. What more do you want?" Despite these reminders, Patricia continued to fantasize aloud about how our lives could change. She dreamed of us trading in our modest home for a mansion. It was obvious her thoughts were dominated by money. I tried to deflect by joking, "Who knows if I'll ever get that inheritance? The process is so complicated, and honestly, I could have made the whole thing up." This comment lightened the mood for everyone, except Patricia. Her face went cold, and she shot me a look that made it clear she wasn't amused. After that, Patricia's behavior toward me took a sharp turn. She became increasingly hostile, and her hostility grew more evident as she realized I might not be as wealthy as she had hoped. The shift was startling. One afternoon, with Raymond and Gary out of the house, I walked into the kitchen to find Patricia glaring at me. Without warning, she demanded I follow her to her room. The intensity in her voice immediately made me uneasy. Something told me this wasn't going to be a casual conversation. Patricia locked the door behind us once we were inside. I stood frozen, a knot forming in my stomach as she held the key firmly in her hand. "You're staying in here until you sign these papers," she ordered. I was taken aback. What on earth was going on? She told me it was imperative that I sign a postnuptial agreement, a legal document drawn up by a lawyer that would prevent me from claiming any of Raymond's assets in the event of a divorce. I was stunned. Why would she think that Raymond and I were in trouble? Why did she assume we'd split? My mind raced with confusion as Patricia insisted I sign. She kept pushing, saying she was handling things and implied she'd have some sort of say in our marital future. Reluctantly, I began to read through the agreement. It was shocking. It stated that, should Raymond and I divorce, we would have no financial claims on each other, no alimony, no division of assets, nothing. Anything that wasn't solely in our individual names would be off limits. I was furious. I couldn't understand why this was happening. We had never discussed any kind of prenuptial or postnuptial agreement before, and her sudden push for one felt manipulative. It didn't take long for Patricia's true intentions to surface. She bluntly admitted that she had only accepted me into the family because she believed I would inherit $35 million, and that would eliminate the need for a prenuptial agreement for her son. Now, accusing me of lying and calling me a precious metal, she told me I was a financial burden on Raymond. She demanded I sign the agreement to protect his assets, all while hinting that she was already planning for our separation. The truth became clear. Her silence on a prenup all these years was based on her belief that my inheritance would take care of everything. Now that she realized that inheritance might not materialize, she was scrambling to secure Raymond's wealth and cut me out of any potential claim to it. Patricia's manipulative plan was becoming all too clear. She seemed determined to fabricate a story or create a scenario that would force Raymond to divorce me. Her end goal was to see him with someone wealthier, ensuring a luxurious life for herself and her family. Her disdain for me was palpable as she insisted that Raymond deserved more than a wife with no substantial inheritance. She disregarded not only our relationship but the love we shared, seeing me as a mere obstacle to her vision of wealth. Her words were both a mix of fury and revelation, opening my eyes to her true character. I had always sensed a certain tension between Raymond, Gary, and Patricia, but now it was clear. Her greed and blatant disregard for the sanctity of our marriage were appalling. This encounter exposed how far she was willing to go to sacrifice her son's happiness for financial gain. It also made me grateful in a twisted way for not having the inheritance she had hoped for, as it freed me from her expectations. I wasn't about to let Patricia's manipulations dictate my actions. I stood my ground and refused to sign the postnuptial agreement she shoved in front of me. If Raymond thought this agreement was necessary, I said firmly, then it should be a decision we make together with proper legal counsel, not something demanded by his mother. I knew Patricia might try to prevent me from leaving without signing, but I was prepared to confront her. My relationship with Raymond meant more to me than any material threat she could throw my way. Patricia seemed to relish the control she held over me. Noting that Raymond and Gary wouldn't be back from their fishing trip for a while, she also mentioned that my work was expecting me back, trying to use my responsibilities to pressure me. Frustrated and desperate to leave, I demanded the keys to the room, but Patricia escalated things. Grabbing my hand in a painful vice grip, she began berating me, calling me a precious metal and other cruel names. My anxiety skyrocketed as her grip tightened, her harsh words echoing in my ears. Meanwhile, my boss continued calling, expecting me to return to work. I felt trapped, overwhelmed by her intimidation and the looming pressure of my work. Finally, in a moment of defeat, I signed the document, and Patricia released me with a smug smile. As soon as the door clicked open, I rushed out of the room and locked myself in another, seeking safety. Alone, I immediately called my boss and explained what had just happened. She was incredibly understanding, shocked by Patricia's behavior, and offered me the day off to recover from the ordeal. I documented the physical evidence of Patricia's aggression, taking photos of the bruises on my arm, a stark reminder of just how far she was willing to go. My anger and frustration grew as I reflected on her actions, and I made up my mind, she needed to face consequences for what she had done. I chose not to call Raymond and Gary while they were away. Instead, the next day, Raymond and Gary returned from their trip, cheerful and unaware of the tension that had built in their absence. As soon as they walked through the door, the shift in the atmosphere was palpable. Raymond, sensing something was wrong, approached me, but I asked for some time before sharing the details. Patricia, eager to control the narrative, immediately began speaking with Raymond, presumably to discuss the postnuptial agreement, unaware of what had transpired in their absence. It was clear the situation was about to come to a head, with each of us holding a piece of the truth. Soon after, Patricia called Raymond down. He appeared visibly upset, holding the postnuptial agreement in his hand. "Dad, what is this about? Did you know about these papers?" he asked, confronting Gary with confusion and anger. Gary, genuinely shocked, looked at Raymond with bewilderment. "What papers? What postnuptial agreement?" he asked, his voice tinged with confusion. Raymond explained, "This is a ridiculous postnup that Mom cooked up for Amber and me." His frustration was evident. Gary, now even more confused, clarified, "Raymond, I had no idea about any of this." Raymond's confusion was written all over his face as he turned to Patricia, searching for an explanation. He was clearly caught off guard, and his surprise only deepened when Patricia, cornered, began to defend her actions, cloaking her true motives under the guise of protection. "I'm doing this for our own good, Raymond," she insisted, her voice sharp with accusation. "Your wife, she's nothing but trouble. She's after your money," Patricia claimed, calling Amber a precious metal and accusing her of fabricating an inheritance to trap Raymond into marriage. Raymond, still reeling from his mother's harsh words, couldn't make sense of her logic. "What does Amber's inheritance have to do with us?" he asked, his voice a mix of disbelief and frustration. "How can you say things like that, Mom?" But Patricia didn't back down. She doubled down, painting a grim picture of Amber using Raymond for financial gain, claiming that she'd eventually drain him dry through a divorce. Patricia urged Raymond to sign the postnuptial agreement, promising that a future with a more financially suitable partner would be the key to their happiness. The accusation was the breaking point for Raymond. His anger flared, and he vehemently defended Amber, with Gary joining in, creating an unexpected moment of unity against Patricia's manipulation. For me, this was a turning point. I watched Raymond stand firm for our relationship, putting aside any doubts I had about his loyalty. What neither Raymond nor Gary knew, however, was that the inheritance had actually come through just the day before. I hadn't shared the news yet, caught up in the chaos of the argument. As the tension eased, Raymond turned to me, his gaze full of concern and unspoken questions. "Amber, why did you sign that postnup? You should have waited for me. You know I never agree to something like that. Why let Mom pressure you?" His disappointment was evident, but it was mixed with a desire to understand and make things right. I reassured him, "I never doubted you would stand by me. You've always supported me. I wanted to talk to you about it, but I never had the chance." I explained how Patricia had trapped me in her room, forcing me to sign the document under duress, with no room to escape her grip. It was clear to everyone that I had been coerced into signing. Raymond and Gary were stunned by my account, especially when Patricia didn't even attempt to deny my version of events. Instead, she wore an almost smug expression, which only added fuel to their anger. The bruises on my arm were the final straw. Raymond was livid. "Mom, what have you done to Amber? How could you lay a hand on my wife? This is assault," he shouted, while Gary joined in, condemning Patricia's actions as madness. Patricia tried to justify herself, claiming she was only trying to protect Raymond from being taken advantage of, insisting that everything she did was out of maternal instinct. But Raymond shot back with disgust. "This marriage was never about money. You've got it all wrong." Patricia, still clinging to her delusion of a life of wealth, lamented that Raymond had promised to improve their living standards, which she believed could only be achieved by marrying into money. This only deepened the rift, with Raymond and Gary challenging her greed and reminding her of the values that truly mattered. As the argument intensified, Patricia's defenses began to crack. For the first time, she seemed to realize that she had gone too far. Faced with the united front of her son and husband, she resorted to tears, trying to manipulate them with an emotional outburst. She cried, claiming that everything she did was for the good of the family, that she deserved a better life for her sacrifices, including providing them with a home. She tried to paint herself as the victim. Raymond wasn't buying it. He quickly shut her down, offering a harsh reality check. "You think you've done so much for us, but it's us who've been financially supporting this house. You didn't give us anything. It's time we moved out," he declared, signaling a drastic change. Gary, equally fed up with Patricia's behavior, reached his limit. Years of enduring her greed had finally taken their toll, and he couldn't stand by while she turned on Amber. He offered a lifeline, suggesting he could leave with Raymond and me, distancing himself from Patricia's toxic behavior. "I support you too," he said, his loyalty shifting away from her manipulations and toward us, his true family. Patricia, unfazed by our decision, mocked the idea that we could thrive without her involvement, painting a grim picture of our future in substandard living conditions. Her taunts were designed to belittle and undermine our choice, banking on the assumption that we would crumble financially without her. But in that moment, I decided to reveal the truth. Calmly, I countered her dire predictions, assuring her that housing and supporting ourselves would not be a problem. Her narrative of impending financial doom had no merit. Patricia, still entrenched in her delusion, laughed at my words, dismissing me as a broken precious metal, incapable of providing for Raymond and Gary. Her scorn was evident, but it was based on outdated assumptions. This was my moment to correct her misconception. Far from being financially destitute or dependent, I had remained silent about my wealth not because I had to, but because I chose to keep it private. Now, it was time to set the record straight. I looked them both in the eye and revealed, "Actually, I'm quite well off. I have access to $35 million. Not all of it is liquid, but there's more than enough to live comfortably." The shock on Patricia's face was immediate. Her eyes widened as she tried to process the shift in my financial status. "But you said there was no inheritance." "You lied." Patricia sputtered, her disbelief palpable. I sighed, weary of the conversation. "Patricia, when you kept pestering me about it, I made a flippant remark about not having an inheritance. I didn't expect it to expose your true intentions. Honestly, I'm grateful for that comment now. It showed me exactly who you are." Patricia, clearly scrambling, attempted to salvage the situation. She laughed awkwardly, trying to brush off her earlier hostility. "Oh, Amber, you trickster. If only you'd told us sooner, we could have avoided all this misunderstanding." I wasn't buying it. "Really, Patricia? If I'd told you it was a joke, you wouldn't have pushed for that post-nup or tried to sabotage my marriage, would you?" Her attempts to retract her actions fell flat. She tore up the post-nup agreement, admitting she'd been rude, but it was too late for apologies. I stood my ground. "Patricia, this has gone far beyond any misunderstanding. It's clear you shouldn't concern yourself with my inheritance. Our relationship can't be fixed overnight. If Raymond still wants to move out and cut ties, I fully support that." It was a pivotal moment, one that solidified my independence and my resolve to move forward, prioritizing my well-being and my marriage over any financial ties with her. Raymond made it clear, "We're moving out. Amber, my mom's greed has no limits, and I won't let her exploit you any further. By the end of this month, we're gone, and Dad's coming with us." The decision was final. Raymond and I had already begun house hunting, and we found a perfect place just an hour away. Securing a home and planning a move within a month might have seemed overwhelming to others, but our financial stability made it an efficient and smooth process. Gary, too, decided to join us. Inspired by the events that had unfolded, he filed for divorce from Patricia, marking the end of their troubled marriage. He filed the same month we decided to move. Desperate to prevent the unraveling of her life, Patricia pleaded with us, attempting to win us over with tears and apologies. But the reality of her financial situation only deepened her distress. Without a personal income and with Gary financially dependent on Raymond, neither were eligible for alimony. Ironically, Gary was entitled to half of Patricia's house, since it had been acquired during their marriage. In a twist of fate, Patricia was forced to sell her home, exactly what she had hoped to avoid by meddling in our finances. The divorce dragged on for a year, marked by mandatory separation periods and Patricia's growing anxiety over her dwindling funds. Eventually, she had no choice but to sell her house for financial survival. Once the divorce was finalized and their assets divided, Gary chose a modest apartment, valuing his independence. He didn't want to impose on our new life, but we continued to support him financially, and we were more than able to do so. Though the events had been tumultuous, they reinforced the strength of our family bonds, reminding us of the importance of integrity, support, and the true value of relationships over material gain.